the gangs. As a result of intense police action, there is need for further action within Central Kingston. The situation in Central Kingston demands special security measures. The clear hold and build strategy of the Zone of Special Operation is one such tool that can be used not only to reduce the immediate homicide rate, but to provide a basis for community transformation, as this is one of the communities identified over time as one that requires special social investment. It is not a replacement for a state of public emergency. The suite of development interventions that are made available under the Zone of Special Operation is designed to bring about social transformation and prevent and reduce not only the criminal violence in there, which is near anarchic, but restore a sense of normalcy and safety to the community within that space. It's one of the tools that the government is using to restore law and order in Central Kingston and across several communities in Jamaica. The government has been clear that we are not relying on any one tool to secure Jamaica. We will utilize all available tools to restore order, public safety, and remove violence from communities, legislative, as well as security measures. Communities must be assessed based on their peculiarities in order to determine the exact security intervention that may be required to restore some sense of safety and normalcy within the community. There is no magic bullet, and it will not work overnight. The Zone of Special Operation in particular is a long-term, medium-term activity, but there is a benefit of immediate reduction in homicides in those areas. Object is save lives, restore order, and pursue transformative activity. It has been receiving intensive policing activities, but intelligence-driven operations were intensified within Central Kingston prior to today's declaration. The level of criminal violence in Central Kingston is challenging to normal policing activities, but I am confident that the Police High Command and the Jamaica Defence Force will continue to make necessary adjustments within the Zone of Special Operation to increase police effectiveness and restore a sense of normalcy to the area. Having this Zone of Special Operation within Central Kingston will add to the effectiveness of the police and security forces in the area and restore a sense of safety in the environment and the continued rehabilitation of the downtown Kingston. The population of Central Kingston deserves to have public safety and good order in their community. The declaration of the public Zone of Special Operation is designed to do this, and I'm confident it will in fact succeed as they have done where they have been declared elsewhere.
Minister Chang, we're keeping to our time specified. We now turn to the question and answer segment. Just to inform you that we have our Attorney General here, we have the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, and we have the CDS designate who are also here with us. Questions?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Just to reiterate, sir, ahead of the press conference, we did go through the medias and protocols. We asked that they limit to 2 questions each time so that everyone is able to follow the questions that are asked so that we are able to respond and get in as many as possible. So then let's start with Ms. Candice Houghton, who is from the Star newspaper. Candice?
Good morning, everybody, and that's I'm representing the Jamaica Observer, not Star.
Beg your pardon, Candice. Go ahead, please, and thank you so much.
All right, no problem. My question is for the Prime Minister. Mr. Holness, you said the zone of operation is more than is a strategic that is not a that is not only for displacement. You mentioned building peace in the communities. What I want to know is how will you ensure that after the zone of operations end, the criminals not return to the communities and wreak havoc, considering that that's a trend we've observed?
Returning to the communities. For the 5 communities, now 6 that we have put in place, the peace has held and held significantly. If you look at all of them, the historical crime activities in the communities that we have declared zones of special operation are far higher than the present state when they are under a zone of special operation. So the criminals have not returned. And even if criminals have returned, the communities have been so hardened that they are not able to carry out their criminal activities. So, to be clear, the first thing that we want to do in a zone of special operation is the clear phase. So we go in, we conduct security operations that remove the criminals out of the area. Then secondly, we enter into the hold phase, or rather it is the build phase and then the hold. We enter into the hold phase. And in that phase, the security forces establish themselves and establish their protocols and policies and procedures as to how people enter the community. They do enforcement of public order, and they carry out special operations, particularly dynamic operations having to do with searches and interdiction. And whilst those 2 phases are ongoing, clear phase moving into the hold phase, the build phase is being planned. And in the build phase, as you would have seen in almost all the communities that we have intervened in this way, we start with dealing with infrastructure as quickly as possible, whether it is the repair of roads, the removal of zinc fences, the fixing of gullies and drains, putting in sewage, and these help in a significant way. It does change the attitude of the community members towards their community. They start to take ownership of their community. And then we go in with other activities such as training, such as helping citizens to get their documentation, parenting, entrepreneurship, all kinds of other support. And then we go into other areas after. We deal with things such as titling, developing citizens groups to establish leadership of the community. And we give support to all kinds of community activities, particularly working with youngsters for sporting activities and training activities. And it is these measures, which they are not new, they are not novel. We have always had a strategy of community intervention, but what we have not had, and which is what the zones of special operations give us, it is the working together in a synergistic and coordinated way to have the security forces working in parallel with the social intervention in a targeted way. And we believe that this will give the best results. It is a long-term strategy. It is not going to happen overnight. It will take time, but it will work. And we have seen where it has worked.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I think I'm now back on track with where all the members of the media are. So let's go to Ms. Janet Silvera, who represents the Jamaica Gleaner. Good morning, Janet.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My questions are you sympathetic to suggestions, this is to the Prime Minister, that extensions of SOEs should be reachable with simple majority votes instead of 2/3 votes, and is that part of the constitutional push for reform for 2022? Next question, will government lawmakers seek to have consultation outside of Parliament?
I'm sorry, Janet.
Sorry, Janet, you fell off, but your first question was an excellent question. Do you want to repeat your second?
Right. So where would you like me to start?
We didn't hear your second question.
Okay, my second question is, will government lawmakers seek to have consultation outside Parliament to ensure SOEs will have the buy-in by all parties before having a stalemate in Parliament?
Two very good questions, Janet. Let me start with your second question. In the previous iterations of the SOEs, there was consultation, collaboration between the government and the opposition, which saw an agreement that where the murder rate per 100,000 is above a certain number, I believe it was 35, if I'm not mistaken. 32 per 100,000. Then the use of the SOEs would be considered reasonable and justified. This is now not from a constitutional perspective, just merely from a public policy standpoint and in terms of building public support. You are right. There probably now needs to be a renewed effort at a wider cross-section of social engagement, including the opposition, including other stakeholders, particularly citizens and commercial interests, as to how the government can use this very effective tool to help to curb the murder rate that is affecting everyone. So, short answer to your second question is yes, and that process I intend to engage. Your first question is wrapped up in all kinds of constitutional issues. The AG is here. I'll give her an opportunity to respond to you. But simply to say that we have to take a very sophisticated view of the threats that the nation faces. I've spent a lot of time evaluating the commentary of citizens about our national security. And what is absent from the commentary, from people who should know and people who probably are just ordinary citizens would not know, is that the threats come in all forms. And sometimes the threats come in forms that the public popularly accept. And in that is the danger. The threats are in guns that are widely available, and there is a culture surrounding its use, even its defense. There is a view that it is okay, it is acceptable to have a gun, illegal firearm, to protect yourself. Then there is the acceptance of dons and gangs. There are communities that feel that dons are legitimate to control space, dispense justice, and give benefits. And we say even some points that they have sovereignty. And of course, there is the devaluation of life, where people believe that taking another life is acceptable in the resolution of a conflict, going as far as to hire people to take others' lives for simple things. So these issues are our threat, and we are now at a state with these threats that we need to have the powers to address them over and above what is considered normal, because these threats are at a level that are not normal, and we are seeing that in the murder rate. So we are in a state of emergency. Whether or not you agree that it is constitutionally so is a different issue from what the actual state of play is. And if anyone doesn't recognize that we are in a state of emergency, which by definition means that you have to use exceptional powers to treat with those issues, then those persons don't live in Jamaica. They are blind, or they have a particular political motive to see the government's efforts fail for their political benefit. And I think the country ought to look at that and examine that carefully. Who is it that has your safety and protection of your life at heart? Who has the care and the concern to get it done? So my answer to you is yes, there may very well need to be constitutional reforms, to have a far more sophisticated and realistic view of how the government uses extraordinary powers to treat with extraordinary situations. AG.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The emergency powers provisions are set out at Section 20 of the Constitution and also in two ordinary pieces of legislation, the Emergency Powers Act and the Emergency Security Forces Act. When the powers are used, they are operationalized in emergency powers regulations. What we have are provisions borrowed from the United Kingdom, and they largely reflect wartime powers. And so there is undoubtedly a need to update those provisions. There are competing views as to how emergency powers are to be used, but the better view from the research done is that these are powers that are given to a government to use when they assess it necessary to do so. Using emergency powers in a politically competitive context, which needs the buy-in of the opposition, may sometimes create a problem where there is competition for the political reins. So there are competing views on the matter. We know that what we now have, which came in the amendments in 2011, actually reflected problems that were faced in Jamaica in the use of the emergency powers in yesteryear. And so, like every jurisdiction, from time to time, you have to revise your laws, revise the Constitution, and see whether how you provide for powers, how you provide for institutions, whether they really make sense. So the short answer is that what we have will have to be looked at again, and also expand the suite of emergency powers. In the UK, for example, there is no domestic terrorism, which enables the government to respond in an emergency way to matters happening within the jurisdiction. So short answer is yes, and we will have to look at everything. And it is not to be seen as taking power from anyone. But the truth is that in a democracy, an elected government is elected to govern and must govern. And the information that you have in government is certainly very different from what you have in opposition. And the burden is on the elected government to govern.
Thank you so much, Attorney General Mrs. Marlene Malahoo Fort. Let's go to Mr. Ricardo Brooks from Nationwide News Network. Ricardo?
Thank you very much, Naomi. Good morning, Prime Minister. Conceivably, you would require the support of the opposition to overcome that 2/3 threshold for the declaration of the SOE. Have you yet met with the opposition leader to forecast to him that you intend to lower that threshold? And if yes, what's been the response? Also, are you satisfied in light of the rising COVID cases that the current measures should remain through to January 13th?
Let me answer your first question. And I'll think about answering your second question. First question is, the government is doing its internal review of the constitutional arrangements that would allow for the use of the SOEs. As the Attorney General said, it was not always the case that 2/3 majority was required. That change was made in light of how the emergency powers were used in the past. The Attorney General made a very important point. The Emergency Powers Act that we have, their origins are out of the World War II protection of the realm. So they were designed to be used against an external threat. But when you use them with citizens, you can run into difficulty as it relates to the citizens' rights. And in particular, with our now established Charter of Rights, it makes it even more difficult. So we have legislative tools that are not fit for purpose. What countries have recognized is that, as I've said before, the view of the threat is very outdated and unsophisticated. the threats are oftentimes now internal, and you can't